Hey you guys, Dr. Tina here. I am trying to make a video for you that I believe will give you some great information that maybe you haven't heard yet, and I'm hoping you will listen to this all the way through. I will try to be succinct, and I hope that you will share this out with as many people as possible, because I have been waist deep in the research the past several days trying to figure out what is going on and what really is the course of this virus. A little background on me: I was a total nerd in medical school about virology, and I studied the 1918 flu and Ebola. I love infectious diseases, to be honest with you, and I'm fascinated by how they move through populations because my background was in animal behaviorism and sociology, and so I'm always interested to see how viruses hit certain species, what they do, what the species' overall health is. Anyway, a couple interesting things about this virus that I want to share. The initial reports out of China, out of the Wuhan area, are that males are being predominantly, are having the worst outcomes over females. Almost twice as many males are going down compared to females. High blood pressure, those with high blood pressure, those with diabetes, or basically cardiometabolic issues. All right, now let's think about the general population of America for a minute. A lot of obese people with blood sugar issues and high blood pressure, right? So we've got a problem sitting here in this country, and we haven't really seen this virus take hold yet. So I can see why people are concerned. This virus hasn't seen North America, if you will. So this is why we're worried. I hope that my posts the past few days have not been considered flippant or dismissive by any means. As someone who spent the bulk of her life immunocompromised, I understand this is no joke, and I have never taken my health for granted. And in fact, more recently, having enjoyed a much higher level of health, I can tell you that I would in no way, shape, or form diminish, although I am not a proponent of fear-based mongering, and I do think that the governments and the powers that be have done a little bit to scare us, and I know that people are scared, so I want to just present you with nothing but straight up information. Here's the deal. So the organ systems being hit, the affinity of this virus to particular organs in your body happen to be heart, lungs, kidneys, liver. This is why we're seeing multi-organ failure quickly in those who are succumbing. What's happening is basically the virus binds to those areas. Now in the lungs, some viruses like to bind to the upper respiratory system, other viruses like to bind to the lower respiratory system. This virus has an affinity towards very deep lobar lung tissue. It's a dangerous place to get an infection and a very tough place to clear. By the time the immune system figures out that the virus is there, we've got a decent viral load, and now the immune system tends to go bonkers against it. And what happens is what is most notably called a cytokine storm. You may have heard about that out there. A cytokine storm is basically your immune system is like, holy shit, go, and throws everything at it, and in turn turns its host's tissue to goo. That's basically what's happening. People's lungs, heart, liver, kidneys, so those systems are readily being destroyed by not just the virus, but the immune system's reaction to the virus. So I hope that makes sense. That's why the hospitals are being overwhelmed, because there's not a whole lot that modern medicine can do for that. When the body decides to go haywire on itself, as in like consider a very severe autoimmune condition would do a similar thing, there's not a lot that doctors can do to slow the roll. Perfusing them with drugs and IVs is not the answer, actually. So that is why there's fear out there. That is why the medical system is concerned, is because hospitals are being overwhelmed, quite literally. Staff is getting sick, but most notably, they don't have a lot of tools to help these people when they really start to decline quickly. So that's how the virus is working. Now, what I found most interesting was why are these populations being affected? Is it because people with high blood pressure are immunocompromised? Is it because people with diabetes are immunocompromised? Maybe, but I don't, yeah, with the diabetes, I get that, but not necessarily with the high blood pressure. We just know, I know some very, very healthy people with just a little bit of hypertension. What I found was interesting in the research I've been doing. Like I said, I've been like waist deep up in this. I was up till 1 a.m. studying this. I wanted to know what the lock and key is. Every virus is a lock and key. The coronavirus is round and it has these spike proteins on it, these S proteins. They bind, they have a very specific affinity for a very particular type of receptor that happen to live in the lungs, the heart, the kidneys, and the liver, and I wanted to know what that receptor was and why. I don't know why this isn't being talked about more. I'm hoping it will be. But what I did is I went back into the literature, up until a decade of literature on the SARS virus, because this coronavirus, the COVID-19, is a SARS virus. And it causes acute respiratory distress. And so did the SARS virus 10 years ago. Not as bad, but I wanted to know what was going on. Oh, first, before I get into that, a little aside, I want you to think of Ebola and how scary Ebola was and is. These viruses are jumping from bats. And bats don't have the same robust immune response as we do. They carry the virus, but they don't get nearly as sick as we do. Their bodies don't melt them when they come in contact and these receptors bind. This one supposedly jumped to a pangolin, which is a cute little critter that is being black marketed out of China as pets. It's terrible. I've been watching this. The species is declining rapidly because of this, and I've been aware of this for years. But now we're concerned because it was in a wet market, not the most hygienic conditions, and whenever a virus jumps from one species to a human without a lot of mutations, we get concerned. Now, if it goes through several mutations over several years and eventually transmutes itself into something different that's a human version, that's one thing. But this thing is almost identical to what's coming out of its original host. Now, I know all controversial concerns aside, we could go down that pathway, but I'm not going to. Let's just assume it jumped out of a bat and onto a pangolin or into humans. That makes it a scary virus. It's also, now Ebola is not the same kind of virus by any means, but I'm just using it as an example. Ebola burns through its host really, really, really fast. So it doesn't have a tremendous opportunity for spread. That's why you see it contained in small populations and it obliterates the entire village, but you don't see it going all over the globe. The reason being is viruses don't want to kill their host. Viruses very much like to utilize their host's own cellular machinery to replicate to replicate themselves. Something in the sink scared Sansa and I. So if a virus needs the host to live and spread it, it doesn't want to necessarily kill you. This COVID-19 coronavirus is doing a great job of that. It is aerosolized. It's not fecal oral necessarily. It's not bloodborne necessarily like some of these other viruses. It is literally aerosolized, which makes it a very scary virus. It's also being aerosolized, and sometimes the infected person is walking around for several days before they even get symptomatic. So that makes it even more particularly scary. Also, it is somewhat virulent in that it is moving fast and it is killing at a decent rate, not a high death rate, but a decent rate, and it's moving fast. So it's somewhere in the middle of that graph. If X, Y axis, one was like how many people it's killing, and X was, how fast it's moving, spread, however you want to do your X, Y axis, it's somewhat in the middle there, which makes it somewhat dangerous, right? So we've got that. I understand why the world is concerned, and the medical powers that be can't do a whole lot once it really starts going into multi-organ failure. So that's why we have a little bit of a shit show on our hands. Excuse my French. What I found was interesting in my research is this. I wanted to know what the lock and key mechanism is. It's angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptor. That's the receptor. That's the cellular receptor that the S spike is binding to in humans. And that is also the same in bats, from what I found. Those receptors, like I said, are found most readily in the lungs, kidneys, liver, heart. So what does that mean to you? What it means to you is if you're on an ACE inhibitor drug, i.e. lisinopril. ACE inhibitors are commonly prescribed for high blood pressure. That's their main job. So there's a lot of different ACE inhibitors out there, and you might be on a different one. But if you are on lisinopril or some other ACE inhibitor, the way that these drugs work is organically throughout you using them, they upregulate your ACE2 receptors on your cells just by default. That's what happens that's just the biochemistry of it. So if you're on lisinopril or another ACE inhibitor, you're probably walking around with a higher number of ACE2 receptors. All right, angiotensin converting enzyme 2 receptors. Certain anti-diabetic drugs also are causing the increase in these receptor sites. So if you're on any of those drugs, I want you to talk to your doctor, because that might actually be putting you at risk. So maybe that's why we're seeing it and having a higher kill rate in people with diabetes and people with high blood pressure. Who knows? Chicken and egg, I don't know, but perhaps those people were on medications that were causing them to have more ACE2 receptors. Interestingly, Asian men genetically have more ACE2 receptors. So perhaps that's also why we're seeing a propensity of men versus women succumbing to this. So that's just information I wanted to share. What's the highlight here? What's the good news? The good news is when SARS ripped through Asia 10 years ago and other parts of the world, they tested different herbal supplements against it. And I've got the literature. I will post it in the description so you too can read it yourself. I'm not making any of this up. This isn't any kind of woo-woo medicine. This is straight up using nutraceuticals and herbal medicine. Several of these were Chinese herbal formulas. I don't know where you should get them. I don't think you should stop taking your blood pressure medication. I don't think you should stop taking your diabetes medication. I don't think you should harass your doctor, in a urgent kind of way. I think you should just be kind and bring this information to them, because I'm going to give you the links that you can share with them yourself. But just know that there are herbs out there. Licorice is an example of an herb that actually blocks the ACE2 receptor so the virus can't bind. And I think that's fascinating. There are several other herbal components in different formulas that do the same thing. So I will post all that. There's probably more research you could do. I just am throwing this out there. Now, don't go take a bunch of black licorice, because black licorice will potentially increase your blood pressure. And if you already have high blood pressure, I'm not giving you medical advice. I'm just telling you facts that I found that I wanted to share, and giving you some good news that there are some herbal supplements that we can potentially get a hold of. I don't know what they are. I don't know where you're going to find these ingredients, and I don't have any place to direct you for it. I just wanted to share this information with you and let you know that the lock and key mechanism is the ACE2 enzyme receptor, and that there are things that can be helpful to it. So I hope that helps bring a little more clarity to how this virus works, why it's hitting these particular populations. As far as the elderly go, I'm just imagining that they're potentially immunocompromised, and that they might be dealing with some of these conditions as well, and they might be on some of these medications. So who knows? This is all preliminary. Again, we're going back through, I went back through 10 years of SARS literature to see what I could find and what did they discover from that, because this is a similar virus, and I wanted to share the information with you. So I hope you'll share this out with as many people as you can. I hope this was helpful. Leave your comments below. I'll try to answer what I can. I cannot give you medical advice. And again, full disclaimer, I am not your doctor. I am not telling you to discontinue any medications, and I am not telling you to go out and buy a bunch of licorice or buy a bunch of other herbs and start pounding them. I want you to do this with the insight of your own healthcare practitioner. I am just the messenger. So with that, be well out there and take care of yourself and your loved ones.